This video is a comprehensive follow-along hard surface modeling tutorial where we make this sword together. It is aimed at beginners, but you'll need a good understanding of the interface and perhaps use modifiers such as the mirror modifier or the subdivision surface modifier. You should be fine if you've dabbled with that. There's also a lot to learn as an intermediate. We talk about topology flow and edge flow and general hard surface modeling techniques. If you do get stuck or find it a bit tricky, then do check out my beginners series. That goes at a much slower pace. Now, I've also put this in my Get Good at Blender playlist. There's lots of videos in there that can help you learn Blender, particularly when it comes to modeling and hard surface modeling. So if you like what you see in this video, you might want to check out the links in the description to that playlist, and you'll find links to my courses in there, which are much more detailed and methodical, and they're far more comprehensive than a YouTube video can be. So without further ado, let's make this sword together. So I'm in Blender 4.4.1. I've got my screencast keys down here, and I've got the default scene open. We don't need the timeline down the bottom here, so I'll move my mouse in the middle of those to right click and join down. That will get rid of that. Now you might want to follow along with me, and here's the image I'm using that I created myself. You can take a screenshot here, or if you want to support me, you can go across to my Gumroad and donate something to help me continue make these sort of videos. Once you've downloaded that, you can find the file and just drag it in, and you'll see it appear in your scene as an empty. It's obviously at a weird angle and a weird position. We can take away any rotation with Alt-R and take away any movement with Alt-G. And that's moved it into the center like so. Now, when creating complex items like this, the topology is fairly important. Where we have these interesting angles going along the blade like so, we have to make sure that there are edges along those areas, following those ridges. Once you understand that, it's relatively straightforward. So what we're going to do is trace around these angular flows or ridges. I'll use the default cube as my starting point. I'll jump to top view with 7 on my numpad, zoom in a bit, and jump into edit mode with the default cube selected. So tab into edit mode, that's edit mode up here. Now you notice that all my vertices are selected. Press A to select all if not. That's all the vertices that is, because I'm in vertex mode here. I'll jump to top view again, and I want to join them all together to create one vertex. So I can press M, and you can also find that under the mesh menu, merge, and merge at center is what I want. So we've now got one single vertex. It's important that you make sure you are in vertex mode for this, because I can now press G to grab and move that single vertex, and I'll just move it to the front of my sword just there. Let's zoom in a bit, and in order to build the blade, I'm just going to press E to extrude, and you can see me pulling out a new vertex like so, and I'm following the line of the blade here. I'll just move that one in a touch. You can be relatively rough following the outline. It doesn't have to be perfect or exactly the same as mine. It should still work. And for the distance we're going to create these, we're looking at roughly around this distance so that we've got enough vertices to kind of follow the flow of the blade, but not too many so it gets awkward to edit. When I get to this point here, I'm putting a vertex on this kind of corner bit. That will help the topology. Wherever there's an obvious corner like that, it's helpful to have a vertex. So I'll keep going along, keeping roughly the same distance so I can follow the outline of the curve. And when I get to the very end, I'm going to the top of it and then E to extrude downwards. So it's kind of squared off at the moment. It will smooth out later on. And then when I follow the blade back, I'm counting the same amount as the top. I'll just bring these down a little bit further actually. Now, if at any point you feel like there's too much distance between them, you can add a vertex in just by pressing Ctrl R. That does a loop cut, but obviously there's nothing to loop cut through, so it just adds a single vertex. But I'll press Escape to cancel that because I don't need any at the moment, but I might need them later on. Down here, I might need an extra one just here because there's a curve, and up into here. And I can select these two and press F to fill. You can't press J to join. That's something that you can do if there's a face in here. You have to put F to fill because it has to fill in the topology or the edge there. So you notice I've got an extra one here, so I need to press Ctrl R up here to do my loop cut and create an extra point just there. Okay, so we've got a good starting point, but I've also got these kind of edge flows or ridges going through that I need to make topology for. So let's go in and let's divide this N1 into 2. So Ctrl R, left click, and I'll extrude that out and follow the ridge along here. Splits into 2 around here. So I'll continue up the top way here for now and select this one F to fill, remember, we're filling that in. and from here, carry on this way. Gets a bit more tricky around here, so I'll follow this one downwards to this point here, F to fill, extrude along to this point here, and then follow this one downwards, and we need a cut in here, so Control R to do a loop cut, bring that over slightly and select those two, F to fill, and I need to extrude across here over to here, so out to here probably, and Control R to do a loop cut on the edge one here, bring that up, join those together with F to fill. Okay, so how do we actually fill it in properly with faces? Because at the moment, if I hide the empty, which is our background, you can see it's just this mesh. Well, I'll keep the background hidden just so it's easy to see, but what we're going to do is go to edge mode now, and we can select two edges like this and press F to fill between them. You can also select the very end one like this and press F to fill, and it often figures out where to fill in, but sometimes it gets confused when there's a pole like this. And a pole is any vertex, I'll just go back to vertex mode so you can see, any vertex that doesn't have four edges going into it. So at the moment we've got lots of poles around the place. I'll come back to poles in a moment and explain that further. Let's go back to edge mode, select these two edges now and press F to fill. And let's see if we can press this one and F to fill from here. Nope, I've got to select those two again, F to fill. Should be able to from here though, because it should be able to work out, yes it can, by pressing F, that it needs to fill in those areas along here. This one it might struggle with, and no, it couldn't do that, so we need to select those two and F to fill. This one it might be okay. This end one, it managed to, which I'm quite surprised. Then this one and this one, F to fill. Don't worry about these triangles at the moment, we'll look at those again in a moment. And then F to fill. Will it go further? Yes, it did. All the way to the end. And then we can select this one. No, it didn't like that. So those two, F to fill. And then that one there, F, all the way to here. Oh, and it's going further past the pole. Sometimes goes past the poles, sometimes doesn't. And we can fill right down to the end there. This one here, can we press F to fill? Yes, we can. We got a fill there. Got a little bit of a mess at the end here, but we'll just for now make a triangle there. And it's a bit messy in here, but I can press Control R up the top here and F to fill and F to fill. And we're not looking too bad for our sword. It's kind of a low poly sword at the moment. So once we got to this point, we need to give our sword some thickness. So I'll select all with A, and you'll notice that the object origin is in the middle there. We need to press G then Z to move it upwards, and I can hold down Shift for small increments. We only want a small amount of width for our sword. So I'm moving it up above the floor like so. And then I'm going to use a mirror modifier. So across to the modifiers, this spanner here, add modifier, start typing in mirror, select that and press enter. And at the moment, it's along the x-axis, so along this way. And you can see it's mirroring around its origin point there along the x-axis. But we want to change that to the z. So if I turn off the x and change to the z, and then move around here, you can see there is now one underneath it along the z-axis, which is the up and down. So we've got a sort of structure of the sword there. I'm going to turn clipping on, that's this one here. That means when I move these vertices together, they will stick together. I'll show you what that means. So let's choose this edge from here, all the way down to probably this one here. I want a bit of thickness at the end there, but I can hold down Control and select that, and we'll take the shortest path between the two. You can see that, pick shortest path options here. So select the first one, Control select the last one, and I can press G then Z. So I'm just moving it down into the bottom one. So there's now a blade basically there. Looks a little bit strange at the end here. And we want to, in fact, I should have selected this one as well, but that's fine. I can just press G then Z, move those together, and we've got a blade there. Then we want some actual topology at the top here. So this one to this one at the end here. E to extrude, then Z, and move that down, and it should snap if you've got clipping turned on, so it'll snap in the middle there, which is what we want. So that's about the right thickness, I think, and I just need to fill in the end here. If you're struggling to find that point, you can select an edge in that area and press the period key, and that will zoom you in, and your camera will then center around that. It makes it much easier to move around. And I'll select those two, F to fill. I probably want to move this one in as well, so G then Z, so it slowly tapers towards the end like so. And there we have it, a low poly sword. Needs a bit of work, of course, but we're getting there. Now a quick explanation for the next part. If I select this default cube in the middle here, what I want to use is a subdivision surface modifier. If I go to the modifiers add modifier, type in sub, then you can see the subdivision surface modifier there, tick that. You can see it's divided each face into 4 and it's kind of smoothed it out a bit, making it a bit ball-like. If I turn up the levels, you can see that it divides each of those extra faces once again into 4 and it's becoming again a bit more like a ball and you can see it going up and up. Be careful, this is exponential, so it quickly gets to a very dense mesh. Let's bring it back down to 3 and I'll right click and shade smooth so it's nice and smooth. If I go into edit mode now, you can see the kind of cage that it is, the original mesh, and then the result is the ball in the middle. Incidentally, if I press this button here, that's the on cage. It will move this cage to the result, which is the middle there, and you can see that there. But I'll turn back to the cage so you can see what's going on. Now, if I take this edge here and bevel it, Control B, you can see the difference that makes to this corner of our shape. These are known as supporting loops. They're kind of supporting each other and squishing the mesh in. So if I scale them in, so scale Shift X, so bring them close together like this, and then let's put another one in the middle there as well, you can see we've got a nice sharp edge being created there. So I'll undo each of those steps, and if I select all the edges and press Control B, you can see how it's sharpening them up, and if I do an extra loop cut with the wheel of my mouse, you can see how that creates these edges everywhere, so it's kind of like a beveled cube. So again, I'll undo that. The really important bit is that when you add in a loop and you squish it to one side, you get a sharper edge when working with a subdivision surface modifier. So in one way, it's smoothing it out and creating nice smooth geometry, but if we want a sharp edge, we need supporting loops. So back to our sword, we want to make it look more realistic, so adding a subdivision surface modifier will help us there because it adds more topology and more smoothness across the mesh. In order to add some rigidity or sharpness to these edges that we want to make into ridges, we're going to need to have supporting loops. I've just noticed at the end here that I need to fill this in, so I'm just going to zoom into this bit of here, select from here to here, so that's select this one, Control select that one, E to extrude in the Z-axis. So we've got a bit of thickness here before it goes into a blade. At the moment it's low poly, so it looks a little bit like it's got some rigidity and it's got some nice edges and ridges. But this is, of course, flat shaded and low poly. We want a realistic looking sword, so we're going to add the subdivision surface modifier. So across the modifiers, add modifier, type in sub, and then add the subdivision surface modifier at the bottom here. I'll just minimize the mirror and you can see that subdivision there. I'll up the subdivision levels to 2, right click and shade smooth. So we've got that nice smoothness and detail, but it's looking a bit kind of blobby and curvy as the subdivision surface modifier is kind of smoothing areas out. So we need to add back those creases, those supporting edges to create those sharper edges. So if I go back into edit mode, also you'll probably notice that I've got my original mesh here and the subdivision surface modifiers pulled this in quite a lot, but we'll come to that in a second. I'll also quickly show you what I meant by a pole earlier. If I go back to vertex mode, this is a pole because it's got more than 4 edges going into it. This one isn't because it does have 4 edges going into it. So this has a nice simple sort of geometric flow as it goes through, whereas this one, it's got this kind of stopper here and it's got a triangle, which could potentially be problematic. The reason why triangles are problematic is if I want to do a loop cut across here, I can do one across here, I can do one across here, but when I get to the triangles, it doesn't go through them. It stops at the triangle, as you can see there, which would actually end up making that into a quad. If I were to apply that there, you can see this is now a quad. I'll undo that though. Incidentally, that's how you can easily turn these things into quads, is just by doing a loop cut like so, but it does disrupt your edge flow. So if I press Control R doing a loop cut, can you see how it's a little bit weird the way it flows through this area now? So that's a limitation of the tactic of turning triangles into quads. However, if I go this way, it kind of works as it goes through the middle here, making this a quad at the end. Okay, so a few things to think about there, but triangles are not the end of the world. You can have meshes with triangles in, like this one works. As you can see, if I go into object mode, it works. You can't notice the triangle there, but it can sometimes cause pinching, and poles can sometimes cause pinching as well, where the mesh looks like it's pinched together. We might see some pinching, in fact, down the end here. If I go into object mode, yes, it looks a little bit unusual around there. And that's because of this quite odd pole that we've got coming down here, which hopefully we'll be able to fix later on. Okay, so how do we get those nice ridges going along our shape? So back into edit mode, a nice simple way to add supporting loops is to select the loop you want to kind of support. So I'll go all the way through here, and I'm pressing Alt and Shift as I go through to select edge loops. The selection always stops at a pole, so if I Alt left click here, it stops at this pole, and I have to Shift Alt left click there, and I'll just redo the end here. So I've got this, and I can simply press Control B to bevel. Now it does get a bit messy at the end there, as you can see, but you can see now I've got two lines quite close together, so we should get a bit of a sharp line. It's a bit messy at the end here, but I'll tidy that up in a moment. If we go to object mode now, you can just about see a line going through our mesh. So that's how we can get those supporting loops working. However, let's go back into edit mode and undo those changes. I want to take away the end here. Let's go to edge mode, and I want to stop at this point. It can get very messy at the end here, and I'll have to tidy that up in a bit. But if I press Control B now, bring that out, and I'm going to use the wheel of my mouse to create an extra loop as well. So we've got one main loop going through there and then two supporting loops. And let's go to object mode now, and you can see we've got a relatively good ridge going down there. Now the problem with this method is that if you want to change this, we need to select this one, and it's got a loop all the way around there, so we need to deselect these. Actually, the easy way to make it easier to select so it doesn't select the whole edge loop around here is to select these two end ones here and Control X to dissolve those for the time being. Dissolve doesn't get rid of the faces. If I select this one and press X to delete and then edges, you can see it deletes the faces as well. So Control X is dissolve edges, and you can see that just there, dissolve edges. So now I can select this edge loop here, and to sharpen it up, I'll select this one as well. I need to press GG to edge slide. So GG, G twice obviously, slide that in. I'm holding down Shift for small increments, bringing that in closer, and I can select this one as well. That one I think is a bit easier to select because it goes to the end here. Nope, I need to select this one as well. And GG to edge slide that one in. And we've got a sharper ridge down there, and that I think is working relatively well. We can boost this a little by selecting the one in the middle here. If I can select that one there, and it's going all the way through, and just lifting it up really slightly, so G then Z, because I think, if I'm right in saying, you would get a very slight lump in the metal. This one down here, for example, might go down very slightly as well, so G, then Z, just move that down very slightly. It's very subtle, but you can see it increases the rigidity or the sharpness of that crease going down there. Now it does leave us with a bit of a mess in areas such as this, which we'll tidy up in a moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few of these. So this one from here to here, and I'll have to select the one at the end there as well, I think, and Control B to bevel. And again, I'm creating 3 lines. Creates a big mess at the end here, which we need to tidy up, but it's got those 3 lines which I want. That's the rigidity, which we can just about see there. Not very well actually, but hopefully when I start tidying it up, it will appear. So let's go to vertex mode and see about tidying this up. Let's bring this one towards the middle. Let's go to top view, in fact. There we go, top view, and just bring that one in. And this one can join up with that one. Let's turn snapping on and to vertex. That way, when I select this and press G to grab, it will snap to the other one. The only thing is, I'll right click to cancel that. Make sure you've got auto merge vertices on, and then when they're touching each other like this or snapping into each other, they'll merge. So a little bit messy in here. How do we tidy this up? Well, ideally we want quads, we don't want triangles. We could obviously push all these down into one point and have lots of triangles going into there, but we want to kind of keep the distance between these lines consistent because that dictates the sharpness of that edge. So somehow we've got to keep quads and keep this line consistent. Well, remember I was talking about pressing Control R and how it doesn't go through poles, it stops. Well, we can create a extra loop cut just here and bring it across to this point here. I'll press K and bring that up to here and press enter, and then I'll dissolve this edge so we've got a quad in there. So we've kind of reduced it down to some quads, it's almost there, but that leaves us with a triangle here. So what I'm going to do is get my knife tool again, K for knife tool, cut from here to here and then down, and now I can get rid of this one here. So Control X dissolve. And you'll see that's a quad-based mesh. And I've just seen there's a slightly quicker way of doing that, but it's not important now. The only problem is we've got this extra one here. So we actually need these to come across slightly. So I'll just press GG to slide those across. And we need this one to come down here. So I'll again press Ctrl R, bring this one in, and I'll use snapping. And of course, make sure that's on vertex, snap to vertex. That means I can go to vertex mode, select this vertex, G to grab, and it will snap to that one there. So now we have got a quad-based mesh. Looks okay-ish from here, maybe a little bit of wobble here. We're not seeing much sharpness from this yet, but we'll get there. Now, if we want to smooth this out, we can actually just drag these across like so to kind of smooth them out and even them out. We can actually do the same for these as well. It doesn't really matter where these, oh, I'll turn snapping off. It doesn't matter where these are so much along the line, just as long as the distance between the lines is the same, therefore that pinch will be the same. So I can move these about a little bit along the line. It doesn't matter too much. It won't make a huge amount of difference to the shape. And it looks like I could possibly go up here. Hold down Shift for small increments, trying to make sure that curve is nice and settled. I'll drag this along a little bit further and move this down. So we've got a nice sweeping curve going up there. Let's check that curve. Looks pretty good. So that's how I've joined those together, and we should have a quad-based mesh here. And the important bit, if I go to edge mode, is to keep this edge here and this edge above it close to this middle edge so that it keeps that nice sharpness. So I can probably move this in a bit. Let's grab this one and this one, GG to edge slide, this one and this one, GG to edge slide again, move those in, and let's see if we can start to see that ridge. Not very well actually. So what I'll do is I'll select this one from here up to the end, and I'm just going to add a tiny bit of height to it. So G then Z, just put it up really slightly so we can actually really nicely see that ridge going across there. It looks like actually I can start separating the others out a little bit more. So this one here, and I'll just deselect the end there, GG to edge slide that across. Brought them in a little bit too far, I think. This one and this one, GG. And let's have a look again. That ridge is working relatively well, but I just need a bit more solidity up the top. So again, we do the same thing. We select this edge across here. I'll deselect the end for now. Grant from the future, I actually meant to deselect those, not select them, but it didn't actually make any difference because they won't bevel because they're flat against each other. And we can bevel that. So Control B to bevel. I'll add 3 bevels, and I'll add 3 with the wheel of my mouse. And you can see we've got a nice sharp ridge going across there. I might actually not need to add 3. I can probably get away with 2. This is quite sharp anyway, so I'll undo that. And let's go back to this point here. In fact, let's do it from here so I can see what sort of ridge we've got. Control B to bevel. Use the wheel of my mouse to create 2. And we'll go to that point there. It needs a bit of tidy up around the place, but that actually is sharp enough as it is. It's very slightly helping this ridge along here. I feel like that needs a little bit of editing, but we'll get there. I could probably bring this one back. And again, I'm trying to keep the distance between them the same. So I'm adapting these ones slightly just to make sure that they have the same distance all the way down that edge flow. And I'll lift this line up a little bit further so we can really see that ridge. And there it is, we can really see it now, which is all down to those supporting loops. So it's a matter of trying to create those bevels. What I'm going to do as well to help that ridge out is start to taper it off down here. So I'm going to select these, and yes, I can select right to the end actually, and G then Z, bring that down because I want it to have this area as if it's thinner. Can probably go a little bit further, so G then Z, bring that down a bit further. I'm just looking at the end here so they don't collapse. And again, that ridge is showing a little bit more, so that's great. Obviously, it needs a bit of tidy up at the end, and it's just, again, a case of figuring out where to put your quads. I'll select them all, period key to zoom in on them. Let's go to top view. And start off just Control R to do a loop cut across here. Bring that in. And I should be able to cut from here to here and up to there, and then down to there. And that's made that quad. Let's sharpen that area up. Looks a little bit strange. It looks like I'm cutting into thin air, but I'm not. I'm cutting into these areas from here. I'll just go down to here for now. And it looks like we're probably going to have to add a bit of solidity there. So I might as well go across here and sort it out at the end here. Yeah, it looks like I can actually just go from here to here and J to join. Get rid of that one. So that's a quad there, and it's just a bit messy at the end here. So I can actually just dissolve that one, K for knife tool, and bring that to the end there. And then I just need to GG to slide that back. And it's looking fairly interesting, probably a bit too far now. And I'll scale those in just a touch. Because of the proximity of these two, it's sharpening this edge up slightly, so I'm just considering the best way to approach this. I can probably bring these further to the edge, and we're so zoomed in that it really doesn't matter as much as I'm making out. So we've got a nice point there. Okay, so we're starting to get the rigidity of these ridges, but we've got issues down in this area. We've got that nasty pole just sticking out there, which is causing problems down the bottom here. And we've actually got the problem where this mesh along here is not stuck to the bottom here. So actually I'm going to have to create another loop cut down the bottom there, which I should have thought about before doing the end. But we'll do that anyway. We'll create a cut there, bring it down. Notice there's an E at the bottom there, E here, and that makes it align with one of your edges. For me, it's the wrong edge though, and I need to press F to flip it so it's the bottom edge there, and that'll bring it down to there. Now I might just double check on the edge here, and we've got all sorts of issues here. So let's just go to edge mode and Control X to dissolve that one. It's stuck together with my mirror, that's the problem. I'll turn clipping off and there we go. That was the actual problem. It is definitely a bit messy down the end here, but I don't think it's going to make too much difference. I can probably just tidy it up a bit. I know that's slightly bad practice, but if we zoom out, it really isn't noticeable. But if you really wanted to tidy it up, looks like I just have to dissolve that one, and we've got quads, and it's not looking too bad. I do think I'd like this to be up a little higher though, so let's select these ones. Just have to keep checking that it's all the way down. That's interesting at that point. That's okay, I think. I just want to lift that up a little bit so it suddenly goes into a sharp point like so. We could even select this end one here and use the edge crease. So I'm pressing Shift E and sharpening that up. So if I press N, I can change that mean crease right up. It's got a very sharp point there, but it's also got a little bit of rigidity down here, but it's got a little bit of a slope down, which it should have for a blade at the very edge. Okay, it needs a bit of a tidy up around here, so I'll just select this one, zoom in on it, and I can actually get that one to go into this one, J to join. It's not F to fill, it's J to join in this case. And let's just go to wireframe mode. It's looking very uncomfortable at the moment as it goes into a blade. And I'm actually thinking, how would that turn into a blade from here? I'm going to move this one up, G then Z. So would it start out thick like this or slide up like that? I'm actually trying to consider what it would be like. So if I do a loop cut here and Control X there, that's now a quad at the end. But is that working? I think this sharpness here I need to turn off. So let's turn that crease down. And it just looks a little bit strange in here. I might delete this, so Control X and see what that looks like. That seems to be working. Let's press Alt Z. It seems to be working. We'll see. I will figure out the other parts for now because this bit needs to come around here a bit more, doesn't it, to solidify that corner. So let's bring that round first. So what I'm doing here is the edge flow of this part. I don't need that anymore, so Control X. And we need the edge flow to come down here for a ridge and here for a ridge. I'll bring that one into this one there. So this one here we need a bevel, and this one we need a bevel. And just to get rid of those. In fact, I don't think I need this bit. I might be able to bevel it into that point there. Okay, so Control B to bevel that. Oh, I've got the end selected up there, so let's undo that. And get rid of that little edge there. And now it should work, so Control B to bevel. The bevel's going a little bit strange, so I'm going to do them one by one. So just this one from here to here, Control B. And use the wheel of my mouse to create an extra cut. And then this one from here down to here, Control B. So I'm adding that rigidity by those supporting loops, but I'm going to have to tidy these areas up quite a lot. I'll press Alt-Z so you can easily see the topology. So let's move that one in there and up there. So they're in together. Looks like I'm going to have to create a couple of loop cuts from here. So 1 and then 2. And from here to here, J to join. And again, it's J to join because there's topology there already. F to fill is when there's nothing there. And then I can select these edges in here, Control X. Did I select the right ones? No, I didn't. From here and here, Control X. So we got a quad-based mesh. Now we need to make sure that these lines, the distance between these is the same as the bottom. We also need to make sure the distance between these two is consistent as well. So you need to come out a little bit. That's fine. Let's see what that looks like. And we've got a ridge down there and a ridge going across there. That's good. Same for this one. So this is very slightly different. It went the other way. So one there, there to there, J to join, and there to there, J to join. I feel like I could have done that with the bevel in the first place, but we've tidied it up and it's working. And if we've got too much of a ridge up here, which we don't seem to, but we can just GG to slide those across and just even it out. That's the way of taking extra topology and making sure it doesn't look like it's pinching. And we've got a bit of a ridge there, but not much here. What I want to do, I'm going to create a loop cut in here and just bring this down very slightly to emphasize the other ridges. Maybe this one and this one, in fact. G then Z. So you can see those ridges coming up there. Press Alt Z so you can see them more clearly. This one, I think, needs to come up very slightly as well. Maybe not. It's got a ridge going through there. It seems to be working okay. At the bottom here, though, it needs sharpening up, doesn't it? So this from here to this one here, GG, to slide that in a bit further, make it a little bit sharper. And from here to here, GG. And I'm sharpening up this edge here so it doesn't look too blobby. And I think we've managed to get a relatively good looking blade out of that. I think there was there anything to tidy up at the end here? Doesn't look too bad. I think there's a triangle in there though. There is. Oh, no, we're right. Let's just double check that. I'll zoom in on this area into edit mode. It looks a little bit wobbly just here, so I'm going to press G to grab, move that up, just smooth that out, slide that in a bit, GG, and that's looking pretty good. Hopefully there's nowhere I've left a triangle in or anything like that. Now the handle is nice and easy. If I bring back empty, you can see the handle there. Let's just go to top view, and it can be a separate object. In fact, you can have separate objects for this metal bit here, the middle handle, and this bit here. And it is just a case of, you can start with a cube, just scale that down. I'll just bring that over and scale it right down until it fits. We can subdivide it straight away. So the shortcut for that is Control 2, and you can see it's added 2 subdivisions. Control 1 would be 1 level, Control 2, 2, and so on. And then I can go into edit mode and just start extruding bits out. Remember to press Alt Z, that takes you into X-ray mode up here, and then you can easily box select vertices and move them into position. I'll extrude this out to here, for example. Probably need to scale these ones up a bit. Can rotate these ones slightly. And you can see the general shape that I'm creating. Let's just hide the empty for now. And let's hide the blade for now as well. So I'll hide that. Right click and shade smooth on this object. Just up the levels slightly so there's a bit more detail, and I can just create edge creases like so. I can select this edge loop here with Alt, left click, Control B to bevel, and have an extra loop in the middle. Remember, use the wheel of your mouse to create extra ones and scale that up. And you can easily create ridges like so. I can select each of these, in fact, and Control B to bevel those. I'll just move my mouse down, so I've only got 2, and it's even firmer, and you can create ridges that way. If you want to sharpen the edge up, then again, we just need a loop cut around there and make sure it's nice and tight. We've got a nice sharp edge, and slowly but surely, if I bring back my empty, you can see how you can create these different shapes quite easily. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. You can adapt it however you choose. You can also use the sharpen edge tool, so Shift E, It does a very similar thing, as you can see. Just press Alt Z and go into solid mode, and you can see the differences in the type of ridges you can create there. Might delete one of these, in fact. And we've got some ridges going on there. I'll just duplicate this, rotate it in the y-axis 180 degrees, and pull that into position. I think for this one I actually did some loop cuts across the middle and squeezed these faces in. The only problem is that does add some solidity here, so you have to do it to both really. I'll just hide the empty so you can see what I'm doing. So if I add one here, you can see it kind of squares this off. So what you have to do here is select these edge loops here, GG to slide them down, GG to slide them in, and create a curve that way. Make sure you do this before you duplicate it, of course, so that you have exactly the same at the base as you do at the end. I'll undo those steps as it's not particularly necessary. For the final handle in the middle, I can actually duplicate this, P, separate by selection, and it's its own object. Then I can extrude this out. Oh, make sure you've got X-ray mode on to select all and then extrude out. You can overlap them, that's absolutely fine. And altogether, it's looking like quite a nice looking sword. In terms of the material, it's fairly straightforward. If I select the blade and go across to the shading workspace, I'll just get rid of these side panels as I don't need them. Zoom in a bit so we can see the entirety of my sword, and let's just zoom out of the material. I'll go to render view and let's change across the cycles because it looks better. I'll change over to my GPU to make it faster. I'll turn on the denoise again so it renders a bit quicker. So for the first material, I'll call this blade. Can chuck it up to metallic, probably a little bit of grey in there, roughness down, and we've got a nice shiny sword. It does depend on a bit where you put the lights, but it's looking half decent there. What I'll do is I'll just bring out another window. Still the shader editor, but I can change this one to the world tab. And then with the Node Wrangler installed, if you've not got it installed, go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, type in Node, and there's the Node Wrangler. Make sure that's ticked, and it's nice and easy. You can press on the background node in the world tab and press Control T, and that brings up your environment textures. So I can open up an environment texture. I've got a whole folder full of HDRIs. So if you need HDRIs, then go to polyhaven.com and HDRIs, and you can download one of the indoor ones. Click on one of these and download. You only need the 2K version and you'll be fine. A suitable one is going to be something like a room, such as this, for example, the country club or the empty warehouse. So rooms with some interesting lights, and you open that up and you can see you get some nice reflections onto the blade. And in fact, I can hide the light that's in the scene currently, and you get some nice reflections there. So on the blade, you can see that if I bring the roughness even further, you've got a nice shiny blade. And we can see all those nice ridges now. Same thing for these metal parts. I'll give them a new material and just a slightly different look. So probably a little bit less darkness, maybe something like this. That one and that one, I can select both, making sure that the one that has the material is selected last. That's the active object, highlighted yellow there. Control L will link them together with link materials. There we go. And now we've got our handles there. And you can obviously add a little bit more detail to your handles. And then the last thing is the actual handle itself. I'll create a new material here. The way I did this was I just added a PBR material. I got my texture from freepbrmaterials.com. I actually bought the mega pack because it has all the textures and I don't need to keep downloading them all separate. But if you're not able to do that, you can just search for leather and I think I chose this black leather PBR. Download the Blender one there and unzip it. Then back into Blender, you can actually click on the Principled BSDF with the Node Wrangler installed, hold down Control, Shift, and then press T, and then find your texture. There's my black leather folder, and here's all the textures. If I just open this up, you can see there's the final result there, preview one, and here's all your materials. You can just select them all and click Principled Texture Setup. The only thing is, it's not actually unwrapped, so it stretches like this. It's a really easy object to unwrap. If I go into edit mode, I can select one of these edges, Control E or right click and mark a seam. Then I can select all and press U to unwrap and unwrap angle based. Oh, I get an error message. It's not got uniform scale. So what I'll do is into object mode, Control A to apply the scale. If I press N on my keyboard, you can see under item, that's set the scale back to 1. Now it's uniform. If I undo that, you can see that it's non-uniform there. So Control A, apply the scale, and it's all set to 1. I'll just press N to get rid of the side panel. Into edit mode, select all and U to unwrap, angle based. And now when I go to object mode, we should be able to see that leather texture on there, looking really nice. You can add a bit more detail to this because it does have a displacement map, but I won't go into that because there's no need, because it's not necessary for this particular model. But you can see there we've got a really nice looking sword now. So there we have it, a nice looking sword. Hopefully you found this tutorial useful. Just a quick note for the final renders, I did do some compositing there. I did a fog glow in the compositor, fairly straightforward. Again, just check the links in the description for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.